It all started with a simple idea. A weekend hike to escape the noise of the city. 5 friends, Sarah, Jake, Emily, Dan, and MIA, packed their bags and headed into the thick woods, a place known for its eerie reputation. It was late in the afternoon, and the fog had started creeping in like a thick, suffocating blanket. The trees were so dense, they looked like they hadn't seen the light of day in years. They figured it would be a fun adventure, just some harmless fun in the woods. But from the first step they took into the forest, something felt wrong. As they walked deeper, the forest became more oppressive. The trees loomed over them, their branches twisting and gnarling, blocking out the fading sunlight. Emily, the most nervous of the group, kept looking over her shoulder, feeling like someone, or something, was watching them. Sarah, who was leading, laughed it off, but even she could feel the shift in the air. The silence was suffocating, broken only by their footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot. Then, it happened. Dan, who had been joking around ahead of the others, suddenly stopped in his tracks. He turned around, his face pale, eyes wide. "Guys, I saw something. Over there," he whispered, pointing into the trees. Everyone stopped. The mood shifted in an instant, and what was once a fun outing turned heavy with dread. The forest was too quiet now, and there was something in the air, something thick and dark. "Dan, what are you talking about?" Jake asked, trying to shake off the unease creeping up his spine. But Dan didn't answer. He was staring into the trees, as if frozen. Sarah walked up to him, gently tapping him on the shoulder. "Dan, what's going on?" Dan's voice was a whisper. It was her. I saw her." "Who?" MIA asked, stepping closer, her voice trembling. "The girl," Dan said, his voice cracking. "She was standing there. She was watching us." The group turned to look where Dan was pointing, but all they saw was a cluster of trees, thick with shadows. Nothing moved. But the air felt heavier now, like something was wrong. "Let's just go back," Emily said, her voice shaky. "This place is freaking me out." Sarah nodded, trying to keep her calm. "Yeah, we should head back. It's getting late." But as they turned around to leave, the forest seemed different, darker, quieter, almost like it was trapping them inside. The trees seemed to close in, their branches stretching out like arms. Sarah glanced back at Dan, but he was staring ahead, his face frozen in terror. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air. It came from MIA. The group spun around just in time to see her fall to the ground, clutching her chest. Her eyes were wide with horror, her mouth open, but no sound came out. Mia's body began twitching, jerking unnaturally, like something was forcing her to move against her will. Then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. MIA lay still, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, her eyes wide and unblinking. What the hell just happened?" Jake stammered, his voice quivering. Before anyone could answer, a rustling noise came from behind them. They turned in unison, but no one was there. That's when they saw it. The girl. The one Dan had seen. She was standing there, just inside the tree line, her face pale and twisted, her eyes hollow and dark. She was grinning, but it wasn't a normal grin. It was sickening, twisted. She was smiling like she knew something they didn't, something that no one could ever escape. Suddenly, a voice whispered through the trees, cold and thin, like the wind itself was speaking. "You shouldn't have come here." The air turned ice cold, and for a moment, everything was still. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She tried to move, to scream, but her body was frozen. It was like the forest had a hold on them, like they were never meant to leave. "Run!" Jake finally screamed, snapping everyone out of their trance. They turned and sprinted back the way they came, but the forest seemed endless. The trees stretched on forever, and no matter how fast they ran, They couldn't get out. The fog thickened, swirling around them like hands reaching for their throats. Then, they heard it. Footsteps. Behind them. They didn't dare look back. They couldn't. But the sound of those footsteps grew louder and louder, almost as if whatever was following them was getting closer. Closer. Just as Sarah thought they were going to escape, a hand shot out of the mist, grabbing her wrist and pulling her into the trees. She screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the thick fog. The last thing Sarah saw was the twisted grin of the girl, her face inches from hers, before everything went black. The group was never seen again. When people went to search for them, the only thing they found were their backpacks, abandoned in the middle of the forest. There were no signs of struggle, no trace of where they'd gone. It was like they had disappeared into thin air. But if you listen closely, if you stand in that forest long enough, you might just hear something. The faint sound of footsteps, following you. Does this keep the tension up throughout, and hit the mark for the creepy vibes? Let me know if you'd like adjustments.